Hello, this is Scott Elliott Hicks. I would like to begin a series of videos. It's an ideal right now, but I would like to take a living spark or a living seed from each of Rudolf Steiner's books and enliven them for you. So I'm going to begin right at Steiner's first book in his collected works. It is GA1, of course, and it's called in the English translation, Goethean Science. We're just going to take a small passage out of this and focus on it, think it through, enliven it, and then extend it a bit. All right, so here is the quotation. Here, Rudolf Steiner is talking about Goethe's approach to mathematics. And let's read what he says. Let us examine the nature of mathematics more closely. Mathematics deals with magnitude, with that which allows of a more or less. Magnitude, however, is not something existing in itself. In the broad scope of human experience, there is nothing that is only magnitude. Along with its other characteristics, each thing also has some that are determined by numbers. Since mathematics concerns itself with magnitudes, what it studies are not objects of experience complete in themselves, but rather only everything about them that can be measured or counted. Mathematics separates off from things everything that can be subjected to this latter operation, to measurement. It thus acquires a whole world of abstractions within which it then works. It does not have to do with things, but only with things insofar as their magnitudes. It must admit that here it is dealing only with one aspect of what is real, and that reality has yet many other aspects over which mathematics has no power. Mathematical judgments are not judgments that fully encompass real objects, but rather are valid only within the ideal world of abstractions that we ourselves have conceptually separated off from the objects as one aspect of reality. Mathematics abstracts magnitude and number from things, establishes the completely ideal relationships between magnitudes and numbers, and hovers in this way in a pure world of thoughts. The things of reality, insofar as their magnitude and number, allow one then to apply mathematical truths. It is therefore definitely an error to believe that one could grasp the whole of nature with mathematical judgments. Nature, in fact, is not mere quantity. It is also quality, and mathematics has to do only with the first. The mathematical approach and the approach that deals purely with what is qualitative must work hand in hand. They will meet in the thing in which they each grasp one aspect. Goethe characterized this relationship with the words, mathematics, like dialectics, is an organ of the inner higher sense. Its practice is an art, like oratory. For both, nothing is of value except the form. The content is a matter of indifference to them. It is all the same to them whether mathematics is calculating in pennies or dollars, or whether rhetoric is defending something true or false. So this is what I want to take a close look at today. So what he's saying here and what we're trying to enliven is that the quantitative aspect of reality is absolutely important and has an relationship to the essential nature of the thing under observation. Let's say a flower. Let's say we're talking about this hyacinth right here, this dried hyacinth flower that I have before me. Let's say that that's our object of observation. Obviously, I can count the petals that are on it. I can look at the stem. I can measure it. I can tell you exactly quantitatively what chemicals are present in it and in what ratio. We could even talk about the frequencies of vibrations which produce the sensation of this particular violet color. But this is only one aspect of the reality of it, and it's something which goes unrecognized is the fact that it's the human consciousness which produces this abstraction from the pure experience of the color in the pure violet, the pure experience of growth, the the way that human understanding penetrates into the living life and living growth of the world around us, and the way that it cuts off or abstracts. So notice that when I meet the hyacinth, there's something here which is living. The fact that I am next to the plant, my body is next to the plant, the fact that the pure qualities of smell, the pure qualities of color themselves are not found in the mathematical divisions. This is even if I calculate the frequencies of the color, this is not the pure soul sensation of color, and in fact, it doesn't include the understanding, the intuition of the concept of any flower at all is not itself countable. The consciousness which I have to be able to abstract and think about things in quantity itself is not countable. The pure archetype, if we're talking about the Goethean experience, the pure archetype of the plant, which is a living qualitative flux that I can merge together with in my consciousness, in my own life, in my own inner feelings, and in my intuition of myself and my relationship to the plant where the place where I open myself to the moral experience of the plant, the real spiritual experience of the plant. This place itself is not subject to the quantitative abstraction. So if we can find the place where we begin to project quantitative division onto the plane of representation, where we start to produce this abstraction itself, there's a good place to notice the living pulse that Goethe is always interested between the life and the death, the fullness and the wholeness, and the way that things are shrunken and condensed. And so we can start to recognize, oh, there is this plane that I have around me, this beautiful plane of representing, this plane of qualitative imagination and quantitative imagination, where I take this plane of infinite space and I can divide it up into sections, so that I might say that there are 27 petals, but 27 can be 26 plus 1, or it can be 54 divided by 2. So you see that this, and there are infinite other relationships that produce the one number of 27. So we see that this space itself, this representational space, which is a production of the human geometrical intuition, it's a production of the dying in our light organism, the dying in our life organism, which allows us to geometrize it all, to mathematicize the world at all. If we see how this plane of light on which we project our abstract thinking and our mental representation, the grid in which we think about the world in terms of Cartesian space, this is something that is conscious. In the consciousness formation power, it is condensing and dying. So if we can stand outside that dying operation, we can see that there's another purely qualitative aspect that we can shape. So this is the paintbrushes which paint on this quantitative abstraction plane, but don't see their operations itself. This is connected to another book of Rudolf Steiner's. I'll just mention it, and we can look at it later way down the road, but this is a GA 324A. GA 324A, which is translated as the fourth dimension. And here, Steiner talks about the difference between a point and a sphere. These are great lectures to enter into fourth dimensional mathematics and above. And he really starts off from coherent mathematical concepts, which can be followed then today. What I'm saying is he's not starting from clairvoyant consciousness, but he's starting from his deep understanding of the mathematics that was taking place in the early 20th century. So he says here, we must learn to understand the difference between a point and a sphere. In reality, a point is not passive but radiates light in all directions. So he starts to talk about the fourth dimension as a radiating power, so that we might have height, width, and depth in a cube, but we also have this radiating power, this capacity to retreat, this capacity to expand, which is related to consciousness and also related to the fact that space as a whole, this infinite plane of divisibility on which we abstract, when you take it out to its end, we find that we return from the inside. So human consciousness, the power of will, which can work in intuition, which can work in thinking, actually can instantly penetrate any place on this plane and can go outside the plane and return back from the outside. So we have the point which radiates in all direction. And then he talks about the opposite in a really a Goethean way of polarization and intensification of the middle. So he says, what would the opposite of such a point be? Just as the opposite of a line running from left to right is the line running from right to left, a point radiating light also has an opposite. A gigantic sphere, an infinitely large sphere that radiates darkness inward from all sides. So we have the light radiating, and we have the darkness, which is holding from the outside. So we're always in our living imagination and our living thinking, we're always attentive to the power which creates the representation. So we're always aware of the point, but what creates the possibility of creating a point at all? What allows the light to shine in the darkness? The darkness has to be there as a holding sphere in which the light can shine. So we have this double aspect. He says, it's not passively dark, but it actively floods space with darkness from all directions. So he talks about take the point as a source of darkness. Let's change this earlier imagination to its opposite. The point is a source of darkness. Its opposite then is a space that radiates light inward from all directions. As I explained in the previous lecture, this is from 1905. A point moving on a line does not vanish into infinity. It returns from the other side. And you can explain this mathematically. So we see that the living part of intuition that transcends the purely quantitative is when I see that the light which is shining, or the darkness which is shining, is then at its limit, at its absolute limit, it turns into its opposite quality. And if we can follow through to this opposite quality, we see there's a place where life becomes death, where death becomes a life, where the living dies, where the light becomes darkness, the darkness becomes light, and there's a transition. And if we can become, in our intuition, in our human, remember who the human is, remember that the I holds its place between any of these concepts and can move, and in fact, it creates this capacity for thinking at all. The I is standing, creating these concepts inside and outside. The I is there on the scene of all these abstractions and paintings and thoughts and understandings and feelings and sensations. The I is standing there, and the I is also woven by the one who gives power to the I am, the first I am on the scene, the great I am. So this opens a moral dimension then, and we see that the moral dimensions of thinking, feeling, intuiting, and sensation are not themselves quantitative. So there's a purely qualitative aspect. And this can lead us into a variety of different aspects. We could look, for example, at this modern interpretation of something that Steiner talks about in the GA324A, the fourth dimension, where one of the ways that people try to consider changing a three-dimensional object into a fourth-dimensional object is this tesseract deal. So we can follow through with this expansive quality of the red and retractive quality of the blue. Imagine this in our mind's eye. And one thing that we must remember is that when we're observing this, when we're creating this in our consciousness, we must also remember that we are the ones who are performing this activity. We are the ones, the I am is the one that is creating this activity. We might ask ourselves, what is the substance from which the framework is made? The framework, the substance in which the projection is made is itself not found in the image. It's not itself countable because it's infinitely qualitative. So anyway, that's just fun. There's a lot of guys on the internet which are producing wonderful animations which can help you to expand and intensify this experience of what's written on the representation plane. And we can think through these. You can try to imagine these grids and such. As I said before, though, in my other videos, the important thing then is to be able to see the power that creates these imaginations. What are the limbs? What are the limbs which enable you to draw the objects on the plane of representation at all? And then we erase. If we want to follow Steiner, we erase the images and we hold on to just the pure powers that form these images. And then eventually we can turn the paintbrushes, we can turn the lines toward the invisible extended world, and then they become possible. They open up their possibility of intuiting real life that's all around us. We could also then totally erase the power of all those paintbrushes and tools and creative utensils that we have in consciousness, and wait patiently in the emptiness for, if we're graced with the living spirit, to show up in the darkness. But this requires a moral opening to happen. In other words, the heart has to open here. I have to look at myself with clear, objective self-knowledge as a stranger, and I have to wait in devoted passivity, knowing that I can't really solve these problems of consciousness with my own subjective power. So I can examine my desire, the way that my desire and will moves these tools, and recognize that there's an invisible three-dimensional plane of projection in which my will and my desire elements are functioning. And I can also erase those and open them up to the world to recognize the beastly nature of myself, which desires to know everything and which can swallow and eat every aspect of the world in order to grab it, appropriate it, and reverse it. So anyway, this is an essential place to stand for entering into the real pure qualities which Goethe was merging together with, creatively merging together with in his observations, where you become the experiment. The experiment becomes you. The world intuits you. The world imagines you. The world grows into you. The world changes you gives you the possibility of creating mathematics in the first place. So we are woven into the living substance of the earth itself. And but we can keep our consciousness here with the gift of the spiritual I am But it's this very good moral confrontation which allows us to enter into real spiritual science, and rather than a subjective, imaginative thinking and wishful uh, luciferic projections into this light grid around us. So then we might be able to uh, enter a little bit more livingly into the life process of nature, where we become the pure colors, the pure changing colors, and the colors become us. And we find the power in us which uh, takes in the color into our soul, and we experience the pure qualities of the sensation of red and opening and expanding. Okay, so that's a place where you can look. To summarize, then, I created a, what shall we call it? Where can I put myself? A fun little summary of some of the paradoxes of quantity, which you can investigate on your own as you're um, creatively entering into this real moral spiritual scientific dimension, to think about the place where thinking dies onto the plane of observation. Not that there's anything wrong with quantity whatsoever, but this allows one to expand in a living way beyond the boundaries of contemporary natural science, which is focused primarily on quantity. But they forget that human beings are in the lab, and many other beings as well. So here's some good paradoxes to think about. The framework or substance in which numerical divisions are made and representation is not itself countable. When you create a set, the process of counting is not countable in the set, something that Badiou took from maybe some of the mathematicians. The relationship of conscious thinking to the numerical aspects of the observed phenomena is not countable. So the fact that I can actually think of the number of petals on the flower, the fact that I can actually relate myself in consciousness at all to sensations, and the capacity to count, divide, project, imagine. The power of observation itself is not countable, it's not quantitative. So, here, if we can watch how pure quality becomes quantity, is there the eye? Can the eye wake up in between these two concepts? 3, the pure sensations, perceptions, and experience of color, pain, morality, life, warmth, light are not completely expressed in quantities. Of course, you could describe warmth externally and describe light externally, but the pure experience of light, the pure experience of warmth, of pain, morality, love, life, color, these things are not, the human soul experience is not expressible in quantity. 4, the intuitive experience of the pure concept and meaning of the aspect under observation is not countable, but it's only qualitative. So you can look into my videos about what is a concept and what is intuition. It's a good research project, but when I intuit pure meaning in pure thinking, when I experience pure concepts, when pure thinking in the formless, especially in its formless creative capacity, when thinking actually is adding to the world by creating and expanding concepts, by human consciousness penetrating into the wholeness of nature, this is not countable, but it's purely qualitative. So intuition itself is not, it's not purely expressed in quantity. And 5, the move of human knowledge to observe the pure qualities of an object and enter into the purely quantitative is not itself countable. This is what Hegel talks about in the greater logic, in his masterful wrestling with Kant. So the fact that the purely qualitative move to the distinctly quantitative is itself a qualitative move, not a quantitative move. So consider that. That's kind of like a Hegelian mantra, Hegelian Zen mantra. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Scott Elliott Hicks signing off.